Morning, kids. I know I keep saying this one's going to be short, and I know they never are short, but this one really is going to be short because I, I want this one to be short. Uh, I want to talk just a bit about the sources for this essay that you're working on this week. And I want to, but I need to start with talking about the practice of theology a little bit. I know that some of you probably think that I have an animus against the practice of theology, and in fact, nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, it was the study of theology that got me interested in the study of religion and literature as they apply to each other. One tiny story: when I was an undergraduate at Cal State Northridge, I took the standard Intro to Religion course, and I'll tell you the truth, I took it like some of you probably took this course because I thought it would be easy. And as it turned out, we were studying some of the great Jewish sages, and Aquinas and Augustine, and some of the greatest thinkers of all time. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, this is stunning, the intellectual capacity of some of these people. And it was up until really the Second World War and even into the 60s that it was possible to be both a great theologian and also a great thinker and a great intellectual. And I think something changed after the Second World War. And I could go on for an hour about that, but that's irrelevant really to our purposes. But remember, it was the knowledge and study of theology that drove the whole process of my life that has led to my teaching courses like this. And I think what has happened is that lately, in the last generation or so, the practice of theology in the United States, and with some notable exceptions, but those exceptions aside, the practice of theology in this country has devolved into the most disreputable intellectual dreck that I can think of. And it's surprising to an extent, but also frightening to me that people keep falling for it. And I could name some names, but I won't because I'd probably offend someone. But up until, the 60s, the great theologians were also great thinkers, worthy of study, worthy of emulation, worthy of struggling with, because they didn't provide easy answers. They provided one way of looking at experience that led to some answers, just like the study of literature provides one way of looking at experience that leads to a set of answers. So if you think that I hate theology or that I think theology is awful, make that distinction. I think much of late 20th century theology is so intellectually bankrupt that it's not worth bothering with. But think back to the Middle Ages when theology was considered a science. In fact, it was called the Queen of the Sciences, given that all science in the Middle Ages was based on a set of premises provided by the theologians and the intellectuals of the time. So please don't think that I don't like theology, because you'd be wrong about that. But as a source for a literature paper, if you're finding sources, and they're quite often called commentaries, or there's a particular set called concordances, which don't really apply so much to this material, apply more to the Christian material, but they're designed to prove a theological point. And so if you're finding things that have that theological bent, they're not going to be useful in this class. And I know you're tired of hearing this, and I'm tired of saying it. But quite often, if a thing is called a commentary, and my grandfather was an amateur theologian. He has shelves of this stuff, commentaries on, whatever, Exodus, Daniel, the Gospel of John, commentaries on something. Usually, if it's called a commentary on some biblical material, what it is, and you'll find this, is it's a theological treatise with the attempt to prove a theological position, none of which will be useful to you in this class, and which might actually be distracting. And I'm happy, I know it's kind of late in the game, but I'm happy to advise if you've got a source that you think is questionable and you want to ask me about it, and if I don't know anything about it, I can look it up. But let me be honest with you folks. You're sophisticated enough, smart enough, adult enough, and now you're perceptive enough. You know the difference. And I don't mean to sound flippant or unkind, but if you're afraid that God is going to punish you for doing literature instead of theology, I can't help you. I got over that years and years ago. So I want you to be strict with yourselves, because I'm going to have to be a little more strict this time. If your source is theological, don't use it, because it won't serve your purpose. It'll just obscure the matter. So again, if you're finding things called commentaries or concordances, or if it has if it has that word in it, it's most likely a theological treatise, and you should find something else. Okay, so please be strict with yourselves, and if you need my help, I'm here to advise and help as best I can. But keep telling yourself, you know the difference. Now you know the difference. You're perfectly capable of judging independently whether something is theological or literary. And so please exercise that judgment. One of the purposes of this class, which we'll talk about at the end, which is way beyond literature or theology or philosophy or any of those studies, there's a huge purpose to the way I approach this class, which I don't want to burden you with that now. We'll talk about it at the end of the class. But it has to do with critical thinking, and critical thinking means having the discernment to know what fits and what doesn't fit, what works and what doesn't work, and to be able to make the judgment with a clear head, and to be willing to do so. All right, so I'm going to stop now because I promised this would be short. But if there's if there's any source that you're concerned about, and if you'd like my advice, please, run it by me, and I'm happy to advise. But please, if you're suffering from the notion that I hate theology, you need to disabuse yourself of that notion, because it's not at all true. Real theology, I have nothing but respect for it, and it's worth studying in another setting, in another context. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to get this up for you. Again, please let me help you if you need to. It's a very light week in the forums this week, because I want you to do your best for each other in the peer review stuff this week. Okay, we're moving on. I put up a discussion post in the forums. You can respond and discuss if you want to. If you don't have time, that's fine too. Okay, bye.